Chapter 4. Mason. What's with the goofy smile tonight? Mason's brother Duke asked as he dealt the cards for their weekly Friday night poker game. It wasn't every weekend Mason got to join his brother and their friends, but as they had this weekend off, he had the time. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mason said, trying to wipe off his grin. It was impossible, though, because every time he thought about Clara's sweet smile, the corners of his lips lifted again. "Right," Pete said. "You look like a cat who ate a canary." Pete was one of the first people Mason and Duke had met when they moved to Southlake. He owned a local comic book store, and though Mason wasn't a huge fan, Duke was. The man had just about everything Batman that existed. "Well, can't a guy be happy? We made it to the playoffs again. I've got another chance at a championship ring. What's not to be happy about?" Mason looked at his cards and tried not to sigh. He enjoyed poker, but it seemed he always had the worst luck whenever he played. "Yeah, but you knew that last week when we met." Duke tossed a chip into the middle to call. "So what happened today?" "Fine," Mason said with a sigh as he tossed his own chip in. "We got a new athletic trainer." "I thought you liked your old trainer. What was his name? Doug?" Pete looked up as he tossed his chip in to call. "Yeah, I did. Doug was great, but he left when he got married, and today we met the new trainer. And she's also great." "She?" Duke's brow lifted. "Ah, now I understand the smile. She must be pretty. Is my monk of a brother finally ready to move on with his life?" He laid down the first upturned card of the river. A 3 of hearts would not help Mason at all, but he tossed in another chip to call. "Hey, I've dated. They just haven't worked out." "Because you haven't wanted them to work out. You've been hung up on Clara since she broke up with you." "Wait, who's Clara?" Pete asked as he raised the pot. "Just his high school sweetheart who dumped him after graduation for no good reason," Duke replied. "Too rich for my blood. I fold." "Ouch, that sounds rough," Pete said as Duke laid down the next card, an ace of hearts. That would help him as he had an ace in his hand, but it also might help Pete, who seemed to have a never-ending string of luck whenever they played. "So tell us about this new trainer. What's her name?" Mason bit his lip. He shouldn't have brought this up. It was obvious his brother was still angry at Clara. He probably should be too. But he was still convinced there was more behind their breakup, especially after today. Still, he'd opened up the can of worms. There was no putting the lid back on now. "Clara." Though it hadn't been noisy before, the silence that fell around the table was deafening. Mason pushed in a few chips before glancing up. His brother's mouth hung open in shock, and the look on Pete's face was pure confusion. "That's a weird coincidence," Pete said slowly as he matched Mason's chips. "It's not a coincidence." Duke's voice was low and hard. "He's talking about the girl who stomped on his heart." "It wasn't exactly like that." Mason's defensive wall was up, but he wasn't sure he could really explain to his brother why not. "I told you I thought her father was the reason for her breaking up with me. Anyway, no one said I was dating her again. It was just nice to see her again, and I'm happy that she's doing what she always wanted to do." That was mostly the truth, but Mason would be lying if he wasn't hoping there was a chance they would date again. Clara had been his first love, and he was fairly certain she was his true love. Perhaps now that she was no longer living under her father's roof, she would see that too. Duke shook his head sadly as he laid down the next river card. "I know you better than that, Mason. You know I'll support you, but I just hope you aren't headed for Heartbreak Road again." So did Mason. He'd survived their breakup once, but it had done a number on him. He wasn't sure he'd survive a second time. "Fold," he said, throwing in his cards. The last card hadn't helped him, and he just didn't have the energy to bluff. Maybe coming over here tonight hadn't been the best idea.